I had always thought I understood love. Growing up, I saw the way my parents interacted, the quiet respect they had for each other. Love wasn't loud or showy, it was subtle, expressed in small gestures, in the way they looked at each other after a long day, in the unspoken support they gave one another. I thought that's what I would have with her. Her name was Emily, and everything about our relationship seemed perfect from the outside. She was beautiful, intelligent, and full of life. Everyone who met us said we were made for each other. We'd met in college. She had this energy that could light up a room, an infectious laugh that made people want to be around her. And for me, it was instant. The connection we shared felt deeper than any relationship I had ever experienced. She'd hold my hand like she knew something I didn't, like we were both on the same path, heading toward the same future. The first 2 years together were idyllic. We would talk for hours, dream about the future, share our hopes, and even fears. I loved how she seemed to understand me better than anyone else. There were small moments, like when she would buy me a cup of coffee when I was stressed, or when she'd leave notes for me in my jacket pockets, telling me to have a good day. She was thoughtful, always anticipating my needs before I even realized what they were. I never imagined that it could all fall apart. People often say that trust is the foundation of any relationship, and I thought I had it, fully. But I never considered that a time would come when the foundation would crack beneath me. It started gradually, with little things that I convinced myself were nothing. She was always on her phone, but then again, so was I. I chalked it up to the world we lived in, constantly connected through social media and work. She had become a little more distant at times, but we were both busy, wedding plans, career shifts, trying to make everything fit. But then it grew. She started coming home later and later, excuses piling up like a growing storm. Work, she'd say, or I had dinner with friends. I didn't question it because I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? She was my fiancée, the woman I was about to marry. And marriage, to me, was a bond that couldn't be broken, at least, that's what I thought. The signs were subtle at first. But as they built up, I began to wonder. I noticed the way she started acting when her phone rang, the way she'd quickly dismiss her notifications when I was around. There were moments when her eyes wouldn't meet mine in conversation, as if she was hiding something. I pushed these thoughts aside because I didn't want to face the truth. The truth meant acknowledging the fear I had that she might not be as committed to me as I was to her. I wasn't the type to invade her privacy, trust was everything. But as the days passed, my gut told me that something wasn't right. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I wouldn't confront her, not yet. I would wait and gather evidence. If she was betraying me, I would have the proof. I would wait until the perfect moment. That moment came on the day we were supposed to walk down the aisle. It wasn't something I had planned to do at first, but as the days passed, I realized that the only way I could regain control of the situation was to expose her in front of everyone. The wedding day. The moment when I would call off the marriage, leaving her with nothing but the shame of her actions for all to see. But before I could carry out my plan, I had to be sure. I hired a private investigator. I had to know the truth. I wanted to confront her with cold, hard facts. No more assumptions, no more doubts. Just the truth. When the investigator's report came in, it was exactly what I feared. There, in black and white, was the proof. She had been seeing someone else behind my back, sneaking around while I planned our future. The evidence was undeniable. I felt sick to my stomach, but oddly, a sense of calm washed over me. Now I knew for sure. And I knew exactly what I had to do. I didn't feel angry. Not yet, anyway. I didn't confront her. I didn't lash out. I simply started preparing for the moment when I would stand before all of our friends and family and take back control of my life. I was no longer going to be the fool who turned a blind eye. She was going to see the consequences of her actions, and so would everyone else. And so, the plan began. The perfect day, the one she'd been dreaming of her whole life, would be the day I would shatter her illusion of a perfect future. The weeks leading up to the wedding were some of the most surreal moments of my life. Everyone around me was buzzing with excitement. Our families, friends, even the vendors were all eager to see this moment come to fruition. Emily was glowing with anticipation, her eyes wide with excitement every time we discussed the details. She had always talked about this day like it was a fairy tale, and I had always humored her. In those moments, it was hard not to get swept up in the excitement, despite the gnawing feeling inside me that wouldn't go away. I kept the truth to myself. The evidence, the private investigator's report, was filed away in a folder I kept hidden in the back of my closet. It felt heavy. Every time I glanced at it, I felt the weight of the betrayal. But I couldn't confront her yet. Not when everything was in motion. It would have been too easy to call her out, to fight with her, to give in to the anger that bubbled up when I thought of the other man. But that wasn't what I wanted. What I wanted was to show her exactly who she had become, to give her the kind of humiliation that would leave a lasting impact. I wanted her to regret everything. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I studied her carefully. I watched as she became more distant, more absorbed in her phone, more preoccupied with things that had nothing to do with me. There was one night, just a week before the wedding, when she was getting ready to meet her friends for a final bachelorette party. She was talking about the day like it was a celebration of her freedom, as if marriage were just another step, a formality that she was obligated to go through. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to tip her off. But in my gut, I knew that this was it, the point of no return. She looked so beautiful that night, dressed in a sleek black dress with her hair perfectly styled. I watched her as she slipped on her heels and walked toward the door. She leaned in to kiss me on the cheek, telling me she'd be back later, that it was just a few drinks with the girls. Her voice sounded so carefree, so unaffected, like she had no idea what was waiting for her. I didn't stop her. I didn't say a word. I let her walk out that door, knowing that once she was gone, would finally have the time to prepare everything. I spent the evening making final preparations, finalizing the file, and gathering my thoughts. I was calm, more composed than I had ever been in my life. I wasn't angry, not yet. But I was resolute. The time for confrontation would come soon enough. The wedding was still days away, but everything felt as if it were moving in slow motion, like I was waiting for a giant, unavoidable crash. I could already picture it, her face when she realized that I knew. Her face when she understood that she had lost me. That her perfect world was about to come crashing down. The next few days felt like a dream. We went through the motions like we were actors in a play, performing our roles without ever truly connecting. Emily was so busy with the final touches for the wedding, and I played along, offering my support, keeping my emotions hidden. I even helped her pick out flowers, a color scheme, and talked with the caterers. All the while, I kept that file close, tucked in my bag whenever we went out, as though it was a ticking time bomb, waiting for its moment to explode. It's strange how everything can feel so real and yet so distant at the same time. I was walking beside her, smiling in photos, holding her hand, doing everything I was supposed to do, but none of it felt genuine. It felt like I was acting out a script I no longer believed in. Emily would look at me with a smile, her eyes filled with excitement about our future, about the life we were going to build together. But in my mind, I was already a million miles away, already thinking about what I was going to say when the time came to expose her. And then it hit me, the moment when I truly realized that I was ready for this. We were sitting at dinner with her family, and everything was going just as it should. The conversation was light, filled with wedding talk and plans for the honeymoon. And in the midst of it, I saw it, the way her eyes darted to her phone every few seconds. The way she smiled at it, her fingers scrolling rapidly, as if the message she was reading was more important than the dinner we were having. I could feel the anger rising inside me. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I realized just how long this had been going on. It wasn't just the affair. It was the betrayal of trust, the betrayal of what I thought we were. This wasn't a minor mistake or a fleeting lapse in judgment. This was a pattern, a calculated series of actions that had been building up over time. She never noticed my gaze. She never realized that the man across from her had already begun to see her for who she truly was. A part of me wanted to say something right then and there, to accuse her in front of everyone, to make her feel the sting of her actions. But I didn't. Not yet. I would wait. The wedding day was coming, and with it, the perfect opportunity to take back control. She had no idea what was about to hit her. And that thought, in itself, was oddly satisfying. The days leading up to the wedding became a blur of final touches and last-minute decisions. It was as if time itself was rushing forward, pushing us toward an inevitable moment, and yet I couldn't help but feel an odd sense of peace. There was a strange stillness inside me, a kind of calm acceptance of what I was about to do. I had never felt more certain about anything in my life. Emily had no idea what was coming. And that, in itself, was almost poetic, watching her plan for a future I would never share with her. I spent the final days before the wedding making sure everything was in place. The file sat in my drawer, as if taunting me with its promise. Every time I opened it to double-check the evidence, a small part of me felt satisfaction at knowing the truth. But the rest of me felt hollow. I was already grieving the loss of the life I had imagined, and yet, I knew it was necessary. She wasn't the woman I thought she was. Our life together, the future we had planned, it was all built on a lie. I watched her as she prepared for the wedding, seemingly unaware that her world was about to shatter. She would spend hours in front of the mirror, getting her hair and makeup just right. She was obsessed with the details, as though the perfect wedding day could somehow erase the truth. She looked beautiful, radiant even, but I couldn't stop the cold, creeping feeling that this was all a facade. Her excitement felt fake now, like a performance for the world to see. The woman she truly was had already been exposed to me. The rest of it, this wedding, these plans, were just a spectacle. I wasn't angry anymore. The anger I felt when I first discovered the affair had turned into something else. It wasn't about revenge anymore, or the satisfaction of seeing her regret her actions. No, it was deeper than that. It was about taking control of my life again. It was about standing up for myself when no one else could. Emily had crossed a line, and there was no coming back from it. This wasn't just about her betrayal, it was about me reclaiming my dignity. But there was still that small part of me, the part one had buried, waiting for the moment when I would see the truth hit her. I imagined it so clearly, the stunned expression on her face, the moment when she realized what I knew, the moment when she understood that there would be no wedding. The silence that would follow her realization would be deafening. And then, the looks from our friends and family, the ones who had been waiting for us to start our life together, to begin this new chapter. They would see the truth, too. They would understand what she had done. I spent the next few days alone in my thoughts. I couldn't shake the image of her smiling, blissfully unaware, as she spoke to our wedding planner about flowers and seating arrangements. I was right there beside her, nodding, smiling when necessary, but I wasn't really there. I was already living in the future. The one where I didn't marry her. The one where I moved on, without her. The one where the truth about her came out, and I walked away free. Our families arrived the night before the wedding, and the house was filled with the sounds of laughter, chatter, and preparations. There was a nervous energy in the air, a sense of excitement that couldn't be ignored. But I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that gnawed at me. I knew that when I woke up the next day, everything would change. I would be standing in front of a room full of people, calling off the wedding, handing Emily the proof of her betrayal. The night before the wedding, Emily came to me, her eyes sparkling with joy, asking if I was nervous. She had no idea what I was about to do. I smiled at her, a small, tight smile, and reassured her that I wasn't nervous, just excited to begin our life together. Her eyes sparkled with trust and love, and for a moment, I almost believed it. But then I remembered the truth. The truth that had been hidden beneath her smile, beneath her words, beneath the life we were about to begin. I felt a deep, aching sadness for the woman I thought I knew, the woman I had once believed in. That night, as she slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I could hear the soft sound of her breathing, the peaceful rhythm that had once brought me comfort. Now, it felt foreign. I felt disconnected from her, like we were two strangers in the same bed. I thought about what would happen tomorrow, about the look on her face when I handed her that file, when I called off the wedding. Would she beg me to stay? Would she try to justify her actions? Would she cry, or would she remain cold and distant, like she had been the last few weeks? I couldn't predict what would happen. But I didn't need to. The truth was all I needed. Tomorrow, everything would change. The wedding day arrived, and it felt surreal. The house was a flurry of activity, with people rushing around, finalizing last-minute details. I moved through the crowd, barely noticing the chaos around me. Everything seemed to be happening in slow motion, like I was in a dream. But beneath the surface of the calm, I could feel the tension building inside me. It was finally happening. The moment of reckoning was here. I could already see the reactions in my mind. The shock on her face. The gasps of disbelief from our friends and family. The moment when Emily would understand that there would be no wedding, no future together. It would all be over, and it was going to happen in front of everyone. As I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie, I thought about the path I had taken to get here. I thought about the man I had been before Emily had betrayed me, the man who believed in love, in commitment, in trust. And I thought about the man I was now, the one who had seen the truth and was ready to walk away from it all. The day was unfolding just as I had planned. But deep down, I wondered, would I regret this? Would I look back and wish I had confronted her sooner, spared everyone the humiliation, and walked away quietly? The answer, as I stared at myself in the mirror, was simple. No. I would not regret it. I had made my choice. And I would stand by it, no matter what. The wedding day would be the day I reclaimed my life. The morning of the wedding was a strange mix of routine and anticipation. The air was thick with the buzz of nervous energy, the sound of shoes tapping on marble floors, and the distant hum of preparations being made. Everyone around me was moving at full speed, finalizing details, getting dressed, talking in excited tones about the day ahead. But I felt strangely detached, like I was floating above the chaos, observing from a distance. This was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life, but all I could think about was the moment when everything would fall apart. Emily was in the other room, surrounded by her bridesmaids, getting ready for the ceremony. I could hear their laughter through the walls as they applied makeup, adjusted dresses, and talked about the big day. I could almost picture her, standing there, glowing with excitement, blissfully unaware that this moment was the last one she would share with me. The last moment of her perfect, false reality. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I had planned this day for weeks, carefully calculated every move. There would be no turning back now. It wasn't about anger anymore, it was about justice. It was about showing her the consequences of her betrayal in the most public way possible. She would be exposed, and I would be free. And in that freedom, I would find peace. I looked at myself in the mirror. My suit was perfectly tailored, the tie knotted just right, and my face, well, my face was the face of a man who had already made peace with what he was about to do. There was no trace of doubt in my expression, no hesitation. I was calm, almost eerily so. This was no longer a wedding day for me, it was a reckoning. The house was filled with the sounds of excitement, but inside me, there was only quiet. I could hear the muffled voices of my family and friends, all eagerly awaiting the ceremony. I knew they were all expecting to witness a beautiful moment, a celebration of love, a new beginning. But I couldn't share in their enthusiasm. I was too far removed from it all. The life I thought I was going to have with Emily was already gone, replaced with something far more bitter, far more final. As I stood there, waiting, I thought back to the first time I met Emily. I remembered the way she looked at me, the warmth in her eyes, the way she made me feel like I was the only one who mattered in the world. I remembered the way she would smile at me in the mornings, how she would curl up next to me on the couch, and how everything felt like it was falling into place. But none of that mattered now. The truth was too big, too heavy to ignore. The sound of footsteps in the hallway brought me back to the present. My best man, Charlie, appeared in the doorway, his face a mix of excitement and nervousness. He was grinning, but I could tell he could sense something was off. He knew I had been distant in the days leading up to the wedding, but I had played it off as nerves. He didn't know the truth. None of them did. "Ready, man?" Charlie asked, his voice full of anticipation. I nodded, though the truth was, I wasn't ready. How could anyone be ready to destroy their own life, their own future? But I wasn't backing out. I had come this far, and there was no turning back now. "You okay?" Charlie asked again, his eyes searching mine. I gave him a tight smile. "Yeah, I'm good." He seemed satisfied with that, and we walked toward the door. As I stepped into the hallway, I could see Emily's parents and friends milling around, all in their finest clothes, smiling, chatting, oblivious to what was about to happen. They were all part of this fairy tale, part of the dream that I had once believed in, too. And in just a few hours, they would all witness the destruction of that dream. We were close now, just minutes away from the ceremony. I could hear the faint sound of the wedding march beginning to play, the cue for the bridal party to start walking down the aisle. The world around me felt surreal. Time seemed to slow as I took each step, knowing what awaited me at the end of that aisle. But I didn't feel the usual rush of adrenaline that comes with a big moment. There was no excitement, no joy. Just the knowledge that I was about to change everything. The moments before I walked down the aisle felt like an eternity. I could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on me, waiting for the ceremony to begin. But all I could think about was her, the woman who had betrayed me, who had built a life with me only to tear it apart without a second thought. She had no idea what was coming. It was finally time. The doors to the chapel opened, and the music swelled. Emily's bridesmaids began to walk down the aisle, their dresses swishing behind them. The guests stood and smiled, watching each woman as she made her way to the front. I watched them, but my eyes were focused on one thing, the moment when Emily would step through those doors and into my view. She would look stunning, radiant in her white dress, the picture of a bride ready to start a new chapter in her life. But what she didn't know was that her chapter with me had already ended. I had already written the final page. The truth was about to unfold in front of everyone, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The moment I had been waiting for was almost here. I could feel my heart racing, my hands shaking slightly, but I didn't let it show. I kept my expression neutral, my gaze steady. This wasn't about emotions anymore. This was about control. It was about taking back what was mine. The doors opened. And then she appeared. My breath caught in my throat as I saw her, Emily, the woman I thought I knew. She stood in the doorway, her eyes sparkling with excitement, her smile wide and hopeful. For a moment, everything felt like it had before. But I knew. I knew the truth, and it would change everything. This was it. The moment I had been preparing for. And as she walked toward me, blissfully unaware of the storm that was coming, I took one last, deep breath. The wedding was about to begin. But not in the way anyone expected. The aisle stretched before me, each step she took in her pristine white gown like a slow-motion image etched into my mind. The guests stood, their smiles wide, their faces full of anticipation. Emily's mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue, clearly overwhelmed with emotion. Her father looked proud, as though the day he had dreamed of for his daughter had finally arrived. They all looked at her as if she were the picture of perfection, the embodiment of everything they hoped for her to be. But in my eyes, she was none of those things. In my eyes, she was a liar. And I wasn't going to let her walk down that aisle and fool everyone. Not anymore. As she moved closer, I could feel my pulse quicken. The room was a blur of white, floral arrangements, and soft murmurs. But it felt so distant, so far away from the reality of what was happening in my mind. My heart pounded in my chest, but I kept my face calm, my expression neutral. The truth was the only thing that mattered now. Emily reached the front, standing just a few feet away from me, her smile still shining bright. I could feel her excitement radiating off of her. She looked at me with such warmth, like everything was perfect, like she couldn't wait to take that next step with me. I stood there, silent, staring at her. But all I could think of was the file, everything I had learned, everything I had uncovered. The betrayal. The lies. The moment felt suspended in time. The officiant, a close friend of my family, began speaking, his voice carrying the familiarity of 1,000 weddings. "We are gathered here today to witness the joining of these two souls," he said, his words floating in the air. "Dan, Emily, today is the day that marks the beginning of your new life together. Are you ready to pledge your vows?" Emily nodded, her voice light and joyful as she answered, "Yes, I'm ready." I stood there, listening to her words. She had no idea what was about to happen. Her eyes gleamed with excitement, her hands clasped in front of her. I could feel the eyes of the room on us, but it didn't matter. In that moment, there was only one thing I was focused on, the truth. The truth that I had spent so many days hiding, so many nights alone with, as I waited for the right moment to expose her. The officiant turned to me, asking, "Dan, do you take Emily to be your lawfully wedded wife?" For the briefest moment, I considered just going through with it, saying the words, doing what was expected. But then I remembered everything. All the lies. All the nights I spent wondering why she was so distant, why she was always on her phone, why she seemed to be slipping away. I remembered the way I had felt when I first discovered the truth, the gut-wrenching realization that the woman I had given my heart to had been seeing someone else behind my back. And it wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't some one-time lapse in judgment. No. This was a full-fledged affair, something she had been hiding from me for months, maybe longer. I wasn't going to marry her. Not now. Not ever. I turned my eyes to the crowd, meeting the gaze of our friends and family, who had been eagerly waiting for this moment. Their smiles began to falter as they noticed the tension in the air. My hands shook slightly, but I steadied them. This wasn't about nerves. This was about something far bigger. Something that needed to be said, something that had been building for too long. And then, I did it. Without a word, I pulled the file from inside my jacket, the thick stack of papers that held everything. The truth. The proof of her infidelity. As I placed it in front of her, I could see her face falter. Her smile, the one that had been so bright just moments ago, faded. Her eyes darted to the file, confusion starting to creep into her expression. The guests, sensing the shift, fell silent. Emily's breath caught as she looked at the file, then back at me. I could see the panic beginning to rise in her eyes. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to react. And I could feel her heart starting to race as she realized that the moment of reckoning had arrived. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The joy that had once been so evident in her features had vanished, replaced by something far darker. I didn't answer her immediately. Instead, I let the silence stretch, knowing it would make her feel the weight of her actions even more. I had made my decision, and now, she would have to face the consequences. "Do you want to know?" I asked, my voice steady. My heart was racing now, but I held my ground. "The truth? The truth that you've been hiding from me all this time?" The room was still. No one dared to speak, to interrupt the unfolding drama. Emily's face twisted with disbelief. She glanced at the file, and then at me, her eyes wide with panic, but I could see the guilt in them too. She knew what I was holding. She knew exactly what was inside that file. "I don't know what you think," she started to say, but her voice cracked as she tried to defend herself, her words coming out rushed, desperate. I raised my hand to stop her. "No. Don't. You don't get to explain. Not this time." I turned to the officiant, who had been standing in stunned silence. "I can't marry her," I said, my voice calm but resolute. "Not after everything. I can't marry a woman who has betrayed me so completely." There was a collective gasp from the crowd. I could feel their eyes on me, the weight of their judgment. But none of it mattered. What mattered was the truth, and it was time for Emily to face it. Her face crumpled in horror as she realized that everything she had worked so hard to build, the perfect wedding, the perfect life, was falling apart in front of her, in front of everyone. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel sympathy. Not anymore. Not after everything she had done. I looked at her one last time. "This wedding is over, Emily. It's over. And so is this relationship." The silence that followed was deafening. The room was frozen. Time itself seemed to stop as the words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their meaning. Emily stood there, her mouth slightly open, her eyes wide, but no sound came from her. The shock of my words hit her like a tidal wave, crashing over her with a force she couldn't have anticipated. She blinked, then looked at the file, then back at me, as if trying to make sense of the moment. But there was no sense to be made. There was no escape from the truth. The guests, who had been eagerly anticipating the beginning of the ceremony, now sat in stunned silence. I could feel the eyes of our family and friends on us, their gazes shifting between Emily and me, some looking confused, others uncomfortable, but all of them waiting for an explanation. But I wasn't going to give them one, not yet. Emily's voice finally broke through the silence. It was shaky, strained. "Dan. This isn't what you think. You don't understand. Don't I?" I interrupted, my voice cutting through the panic in hers. "I understand perfectly, Emily. I understand everything." Her face twisted in confusion, then desperation. She took a step toward me, as if reaching out for something, some shred of control, some way to stop the unraveling. "Please," she whispered, the word barely audible as she tried to reach for the file. "Please let me explain." But I was done listening. There was no explanation that would make it better. There was no justification that could erase the reality of what had happened. I couldn't hear her excuses, not when I had already seen everything, her texts, the messages, the hotel bookings, the late nights that weren't spent working or with friends. I had watched our life together unravel in a way I couldn't have imagined, and now she was asking me to forgive her, to hear her side. No. I wouldn't. I couldn't. "Emily," I said softly, but the words were sharp, a quiet finality in my tone. "I don't need you to explain. I know everything. And I don't think there's anything you could say that would change what's already been done." Her eyes filled with tears now, but they weren't tears of remorse, not yet. They were the tears of someone who was caught, someone who didn't want to lose everything they had taken for granted. The world she had built for herself was falling apart, and she was desperate to cling to whatever piece of it she could. She stepped back, her hands trembling as she wiped her eyes. "Please, don't do this. Please. I love you. I need you." The words seemed to come from a different version of her, a version that I didn't recognize. The version of Emily I thought I knew would have never done this, never hurt me this way. She was pleading now, broken in front of me, and in that moment, I realized how far gone she was, how deep the betrayal ran. But there was no part of me that felt the need to console her. There was no part of me that wanted to go back, to try and fix things. The damage was done, and now I was just watching it all play out. Emily, the woman I had loved, had chosen someone else. And I wouldn't, pretend that it didn't matter. I turned to the officiant, who had been standing by in stunned silence, his face pale, his eyes darting between us. He had no idea how to react, no idea how to proceed with a wedding that had just been torn apart in front of everyone. I could see his discomfort, his uncertainty. I didn't need him to do anything. This was my moment. My decision. I think, I said, my voice loud enough for everyone to hear, that it's clear this wedding is not happening. There's no point in pretending otherwise. I felt a strange sense of detachment as I spoke. It was as though I was watching myself from a distance, watching the man who had been so in love with Emily, the man who had believed in their future, as he stood there, ending it all in front of an audience. But it wasn't sadness I felt, it was relief. Relief that I was finally putting an end to this, that I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. Emily took another step toward me, her voice now pleading, desperate. Dan, please, just listen to me. I made a mistake. I've been confused. I didn't know what I was doing. But I love you. I'm sorry. Please, just give me a chance to fix this. I shook my head, my eyes cold as I met her gaze. No, Emily. You had your chance. You've had many chances. And every time, you chose him. You chose someone else over me. And that's something I can't overlook. Her face crumbled, and she stepped back, her tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. No. Please. Don't do this. Please don't leave me. But I was already turning away. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to do. The truth had come to light, and with it, so had my resolve. This wedding was over. This relationship was over. And there was no going back. I walked down the aisle, my heart heavy with the finality of it, but also lighter than it had been in months. I had done what I needed to do. I had taken back my dignity, and now, I was leaving the illusion of this life behind. As I stepped out of the chapel, I could hear Emily's sobs behind me, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. There was nothing left for me there. The silence in the room was deafening. And in that silence, I found my freedom. The aftermath of that day was a chaotic blur. What had been intended to be one of the happiest days of my life, a celebration of love and commitment, had turned into a spectacle of heartbreak, betrayal, and shattered illusions. I had walked away from the altar, leaving Emily standing there in her wedding dress, in front of everyone, broken and exposed. The weight of that moment still pressed down on me as I made my way out of the chapel. The guests didn't know what to do. There was no script for what had just happened. Some of them stood in stunned silence, unsure if they should speak, if they should leave, or if they should try to comfort Emily, who had fallen to her knees in a mixture of tears and disbelief. Others whispered in hushed tones, exchanging glances, trying to process the scene they had just witnessed. And there was the occasional gasp, the disbelieving murmur that rippled through the crowd. The shock was palpable. I could hear Emily calling after me, her voice cracking as she shouted my name. Dan! Please! Don't leave me! But I didn't stop. I couldn't. The decision had been made. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. As I stepped into the cool air outside, I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The weight of everything, the lies, the betrayal, the years I had invested, was suddenly lifted off my shoulders. But that didn't mean it was easy. There was a part of me that was still grieving the life I thought I had. There was a part of me that wished it hadn't come to this, that I could have somehow been wrong, that I could have gone back to the way things were. But I wasn't wrong. And I couldn't go back. The man who stood outside the chapel wasn't the same person who had entered it earlier that morning. I had changed. I had taken control, and now, I had to live with the consequences of my choices. My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking my reverie. It was a message from my best man, Charlie. He had been there, in the crowd, and I knew he must have been as shocked as everyone else. Dan, what the hell just happened? Are you okay? I stared at the screen for a moment, unsure of how to respond. What could I say? What explanation could I offer for something that had played out so drastically, so unexpectedly? I had no answers. I had no words that would make any of this easier. I typed back quickly, I'm fine. It's over. I had to do it. The phone buzzed again almost immediately, and I braced myself for what was coming. What the hell, man? I can't believe you actually did it. I thought you were just freaking out. That was brutal. Emily's a mess. Her parents are losing it. You need to explain to someone, anything. This is insane. I took another deep breath, feeling the weight of the world on my chest. I didn't want to explain anything. I didn't want to have to relive that moment with anyone. I had made my decision, and now, I was dealing with the fallout. I don't owe anyone an explanation. I'm done. It's over. Please don't call me right now. I hit send, and I put my phone in my pocket, knowing that this would be the start of a long, painful road. There was no telling what the fallout from this would be. My family, Emily's family, our friends, they would all be affected by what had happened today. And I didn't know if I was prepared for that. I didn't know if I cared. I knew what I had to do next. I needed space. I needed time to process, to grieve, to rebuild. I couldn't go back to the house we had planned to share. I couldn't be in a place that still smelled like her perfume, that still held the memories of the life we thought we were going to have together. As I walked away from the chapel, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Part of me was relieved that I had finally freed myself from the lie. But another part of me was empty, hollow. I had loved her. I had trusted her. And now, everything we had built together had turned to dust. I didn't want to be around anyone right now. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to explain. I just needed to be alone. So, I went to my car, got in, and drove. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. I just needed to be far away from all of it. As the miles passed, I could feel the tension in my body starting to ease. I wasn't sure where I was headed, but I knew one thing: I was never going back. The wedding, the life I had imagined, was over. The life I had to create for myself now was just beginning. I drove aimlessly for hours, stopping only when I needed gas or a drink, not really caring about time. I didn't want to go back. Not to the house, not to the wedding, not to any of it. But as the day wore on, the weight of everything began to hit me. The silence of the car, the endless road stretching ahead, it all felt so final. I was no longer just a man standing at the altar, calling off a wedding. I was someone who had just lost everything, someone who had just shattered a dream and walked away from it. And yet, there was no part of me that regretted it. Not yet. I didn't know what was going to happen next. But I knew one thing: I would never let myself be that person again. The one who trusted blindly, the one who ignored the signs, the one who allowed someone else's betrayal to go unnoticed. From this moment forward, I was going to be someone else. Someone stronger. Someone who wouldn't make the same mistake again. I wasn't sure what my future held. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over it. And that was enough for now. The days that followed the wedding were a blur. I didn't want to talk to anyone, and I didn't want to explain myself. I just wanted to exist in silence, in the space that I had carved out for myself in the wake of everything that had happened. I didn't go back to the house, and I didn't return any of the dozens of texts or calls from Emily's friends, my family, or even Charlie, who was still desperately trying to understand what had happened. I stayed in a small hotel for the first few nights. It was nothing special, just a place to sleep, a place to think. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sound that filled the silence. I spent hours lying awake in that small room, replaying the events of the wedding day over and over in my mind. The looks on the faces of the guests, the shock in Emily's eyes when she realized what I was doing, and the way her voice had trembled when she pleaded for me to stay. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see her, standing there in her wedding dress, looking so out of place, so broken. But despite the pain, despite the emptiness that I felt in those quiet moments, I didn't regret it. I couldn't. I had done what I had to do. I had faced the truth, and I had walked away from a life built on lies. As the days turned into weeks, I started to piece together what was left of my life. I didn't talk to Emily, and I didn't try to reach out to anyone involved in the wedding. They had all been a part of the illusion I had built with her, and now, they were just reminders of what I had lost. I knew I had to start over. But starting over wasn't as simple as packing a bag and leaving it all behind. There were things I had to face. My family, for one. They had been so excited about the wedding. They had planned for it, paid for it, and they had been just as invested in the life Emily and I were supposed to share. How would I explain to them what had happened? How could I tell them that I had called off the wedding, in front of everyone, and walked away from the life they had imagined for me? But I also knew that I didn't owe them an explanation. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. This was my life, and I was the one who had to live with the choices I made. If they couldn't understand that, then that was on them. Charlie, who had been my best man and one of my closest friends, finally caught up with me after a few days of silence. He was the first person I spoke to about everything that had happened. He showed up at my hotel room, looking worn and tired, but determined to get answers. "I know you don't want to talk about it, man," he said, sitting down on the edge of my bed, his voice calm but full of concern. "But I need to know what happened. Why did you do it? Why now?" I looked at him, taking a deep breath. "Because I had to," I said quietly. "Because if I didn't, I would have lost myself. I would have stayed in that relationship, in that lie, and I would have hated myself for it. I couldn't do that anymore." Charlie stayed quiet for a moment, nodding slowly. "I get that," he said, his voice softer now. "But I still don't understand. What made you wait until the wedding? Why not say something earlier?" I sat up, rubbing my face with my hands, trying to put into words what had been swirling in my mind for so long. Because I needed proof. I needed to know, for sure. I needed to be sure I wasn't just being paranoid or overreacting. I had to have the evidence in front of me. And once I saw it, I couldn't pretend anymore. Charlie nodded again, his face full of understanding. "So, you just couldn't go through with it." "Exactly," I replied. "I couldn't marry her. I couldn't stand there, saying those vows, knowing what I knew. Knowing she didn't respect me. Knowing she didn't love me the way I loved her." The silence between us stretched for a few moments. Charlie wasn't pushing me for more. He understood. He didn't need all the details. He just needed to know that I had made the decision that was right for me. After a few minutes, he spoke again. "You know, man, this sucks. I can't even imagine how you feel. But I'll tell you this, you're going to be okay. You'll find your way out of this. You've got your whole life ahead of you. You don't need her." His words were comforting, but they didn't make the hurt go away. I knew what he meant, but the reality of starting over still felt like an impossible mountain to climb. I had built my life around Emily. I had pictured our future together for so long, and now it was all gone. But somewhere beneath the pain, beneath the loss, there was a flicker of hope. A tiny spark that told me I would be okay. It would take time. I knew that. But it was time that I had to give myself. I had to let go of the life I had imagined, the future I had planned with someone who no longer existed. And in that space, I would find myself again. I had no idea what that would look like, or where I would go from here. But I knew that I would never again let someone else define my worth. I would rebuild. As the weeks passed, I started to piece my life back together. I moved into a small apartment, far from the life I had shared with Emily. It was bare at first, just the basics, furniture I had bought on my own, things I had chosen for myself. But it was mine. It felt like a fresh start, even though it was hard to shake the ghosts of the past that lingered in every room. I found new hobbies, ones that had nothing to do with Emily. I spent time doing things that I had neglected for so long, things I used to enjoy before I got lost in a relationship that wasn't what I thought it was. I reconnected with old friends, spent time with my family, and slowly, I began to feel like myself again. One day, Charlie came over to visit. He looked at me with a small smile, like he was proud of what I had done. "You're doing okay," he said. "You're moving on." And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just moving on. I was growing. I was becoming someone stronger, someone who wouldn't tolerate being treated like I had been. I wasn't the same man I was when I walked into that chapel. And as painful as everything had been, I knew that I had come out the other side of it better. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. But it would be mine. And that was enough for now.